Joining us now from Moscow is Anton Fedyashin. He's professor of Russian history at the American University here in Washington. Anton, I want to get your take on Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and how he really addressed a question from reporters at the State Department today. And then I want to get your take. So let's listen to what he said.
Does the Comey firing cast a shadow over your talks, gentlemen?
Was he fired?
Yes.
You are kidding. You are kidding.
What do you make of that? Did something get lost in translation, or is that Sergei Lavrov just simply being sarcastic?
It's hard to speak for Sergei Lavrov. I'm sure that the Russians were informed about what had happened, but so I'd have to go with sarcasm. But look, everything else that Lavrov said today, especially in the press conference that he held at the Russian embassy in Washington, D.C., is really consistent with what the Russian position has been so far, that the internal issues in the United States are exactly that, internal issues. And until there is direct evidence produced of Russian meddling, this is so far a hypothesis.
This drama unfolding in Washington is certainly dominating the headlines in the United States. You're in Moscow. I'm just curious how this is all playing out where you are.
You know, very calmly, actually. You know, it's all over the news, of course, what happened with Comey's dismissal, his firing. But there's been very little sort of analytical commentary about this. The Russian news agencies, the journalists, are emphasizing the fact that, again, they've been consistently emphasizing for several months now that no incriminating evidence has actually come forward, either from the FBI investigation or from any of the investigations on the Hill. So this question of meddling is still in the hypothesis stage. So the Russians are expecting evidence to be provided if they are to respond to anything concrete.
Let me pose a question to you that I asked our White House correspondent Jessica Stone. How much do you believe Comey's sacking and the FBI's investigation is really overshadowing talks on some very important and serious foreign policy issues between Moscow and Washington, with Lavrov being here?
Well, look, first of all, you know, it's impossible to say whether the firing and the arrival of Lavrov were in any way connected. I really doubt they were. It is true that the dismissal has overshadowed Lavrov's visit in terms of the amount of news coverage. But on the other hand, you know, the Russians, the Putin administration and the Trump administration have shown that they are not really willing to get into the details of their negotiations publicly. This was the same in early April when Tillerson visited Moscow. So whatever's being negotiated is kept under wraps. The big takeaway for me from today's meeting and the statements after it is that Lavrov stressed that both sides are taking a very non-ideological approach, that they're trying to rebuild the relationship based on pragmatism, on mutual interest, on cooperation, and they're going to take it step by step. No big breakthroughs, no loud sort of programs are to be expected, but there seems to be definitely on both sides an attempt to begin to rebuild a relationship that was left in a very low state at the end of the Obama administration.
And Anton, quickly, do you see these two countries reaching some kind of consensus and agreement as they work together on Syria and Ukraine?
Well, they're gonna have to. I think the first breakthroughs will happen in Syria simply because ironically, it's a little bit less politicized and doesn't involve the EU as directly as does the issue in Ukraine. And in Syria, there is sort of a roadmap about how to proceed, and that begins with this proposal that the Russians, the Iranians, and the Turks made about the safe zones. Now the details will have to be hashed out. Ukraine, nothing concrete has come out yet. We know that the Trump administration has taken a fairly cool attitude to the Ukraine situation, has sort of stepped back. They declared that the sanctions will not be lifted, but that's because there's a big meeting with NATO allies coming up in Brussels. They want their flanks covered. So I think Syria is going to be the place to watch first, and then Ukraine will be collateral development.
All right, Anton Fedyashin, thank you so much for joining us.